Why did the laughter sting more than the cold? Maybe because it wasn't the first time. Maybe because she had expected it. The moment Arya Cross stepped onto the yard of Blackthorn's citadel, the jeers started. Her boots were scuffed, her faded t-shirt stretched thin like it had lived through 2 wars already, and her backpack looked as if a single thread could tear it apart. She didn't look like a soldier. Not to them. Not to the recruits who lined the stone courtyard, muscles flexing, haircuts sharp, pride swelling. "Army takes strays now," one of them called. "Wrong turn, sweetheart," another added. The laughter carried across the yard, bouncing between the iron gates and the fortress walls. They laughed as if she was a mistake, a trespasser, someone who didn't belong in a place like this. But Arya didn't answer. Her hands stayed deep in her pockets, her gaze calm, unmoving, like she was listening for something else, something only she could hear. That silence, it didn't weaken her, it weakened them. The laughter grew louder because she refused to flinch. Every sneer echoed harsher because she gave them nothing back. They wanted her to break. They wanted her to defend herself, to cry, to lash out. But Arya Cross stood still. And then came Mason Holt. He was the golden boy of the citadel, broad-shouldered, handsome in that way officers' sons often were. His smile cut sharp across his face as he closed in. Everyone knew Holt. Everyone feared him or wanted his approval. He didn't waste time. With a grin, he snatched at Arya's collar and ripped her shirt straight down the back. The recruits roared, "See, she's nothing." The laughter was a wave, cruel, merciless. And then it stopped. Because what stared back at them wasn't weakness. It wasn't graffiti ink. It wasn't the kind of tattoo you got on a dare after too much whiskey. It was a serpent, coiled tight, its fangs shattered, dripping poison into the skull it pierced. Black ink carved deep, alive under the flare light from the tower. The mark of phantom Hydra. The yard froze. Boots scraped stone as even the cockiest recruits leaned back. Commander Roar Vale, towering, shoulders like granite, voice that carried like thunder, stopped mid-stride. His eyes locked on the tattoo, his face unreadable. But it was Vale who moved first. On the balcony above, a man who had watched in silence until then stirred. General Kalen Draven. His chest was decorated with medals from campaigns stretching back decades, his hair silver, his face carved with lines of war. He had seen everything, or so they thought. Now he was pale. His eyes widened. His arms, once folded with boredom, dropped to his sides. And in front of every recruit, every officer, every smirking cadet, General Draven did something none of them could process. He stepped forward, straightened his spine, and saluted her. The crack of his hand to his brow was louder than all their laughter combined. The courtyard fell silent. Even the wind through the iron gates seemed to hush. Why would a general, a man whose very name carried weight in war councils, salute a girl they thought was a nobody? Mason Holt's grip loosened, his grin faltered, he stumbled back, his voice breaking. "What the hell is that mark?" Arya didn't answer him. She didn't have to. The silence was enough. But everyone in that yard knew the whispers. Phantom Hydra wasn't a unit listed in NATO records. It wasn't in the files. It wasn't a name you found in manuals or textbooks. It was a ghost, a myth, a covert order erased from history. And yet, a mark of it was burned into her back. Those who bore it weren't just soldiers. They weren't even operatives. They were weapons, promises forged in silence. Now one of them stood in the dirt, with mud on her boots and a torn shirt clinging to her shoulders. Arya Cross, the girl they thought was lost, the girl they thought didn't belong. General Draven's voice carried across the stone yard, rough, uneven, almost afraid. "Who gave you the right," he demanded, "to wear that insignia?" Every recruit leaned forward, breath caught, waiting. Arya lowered her gaze, calm, steady. Her voice was soft, but it cut through the silence like steel. "I didn't ask for it, it was given. 2 sentences, that was all." And suddenly, every jeer, every smirk, every insult felt like ash. She turned, walked away, her steps slow, deliberate, unhurried. Not a single recruit dared follow, not even Holt. Because now, the question burned hotter than the mark itself. Who exactly was Arya Cross? The first day was rough, but the citadel wasn't done. 15 kilometers, jagged terrain, mud pits, rocks scorched by sun. They called it the Iron Veil Ridge Crucible, gear strapped heavy to their backs, no brakes, no mercy. Cadets stumbled, their breath ragged, mud clawed at their boots. And in the middle of that formation was Arya Cross. Her torn shirt hung loose, her boots sank, her silence held. Sierra Kane, sharp-tongued, her ponytail whipping like a blade in the wind, leaned close. "Pick it up, Charity Case," she hissed. "You're dragging us down." Arya didn't answer, she never did. Her pace steady, her breathing calm, like the hill wasn't breaking her, like the weight wasn't crushing her. But Mason Holt wasn't done, not yet. He jogged up beside her, shoulder wide, smirk sharp again. "You even belong here," he barked loud enough for every cadet to hear. The group roared, feeding on his bravado. Then he slammed into her, his shoulder hard against hers. Arya dropped into the mud, knees sinking deep. The laughter doubled, echoed across the ridge. "Sign her up for floor duty," Holt called. "Crosshold." The laughter stung, but not her. She wiped her palms on her pants, stood, and kept moving. No words, no fury, just forward. And for the first time, Holt's smirk twitched. Later in the weapons bay came the rifle disassembly drill. Standard time, 2 minutes. Recruits cursed, fumbling with pins, dropping bolts in the dirt. Holt finished first, 1 minute 43 seconds. He grinned like he owned the place. Sierra scraped by, shaking at the final click, 1:59. The instructors barely nodded. Then Arya stepped forward. No hesitation, no wasted motion, pin out, bolt free, pieces set in a perfect grid like she had rehearsed it in her sleep. 47 seconds. The stopwatch froze in the sergeant's hand. His jaw tightened. He leaned toward Commander Vale. "Her hands didn't shake," he muttered. "Not once." The recruit stared, silence stretched. Holt scoffed, his voice weaker than he wanted it to sound. "So she can clean a gun, doesn't mean she can fight." The words carried, but the edge was gone. Later, Arya sat on a wooden bench, chewing a granola bar. Sierra strutted over with 2 cadets in tow, mockery dripping from her voice. "Where'd you even come from, Cross? Win a raffle to get here." Arya looked up once, calm. "I applied." Flat cold, like statting the weather. Sierra's smile faltered. "Yeah, well, you don't exactly scream elite soldier." Her friends giggled, trying to feed off her bravado. Arya leaned forward, her eyes steady. "I'm not here for you, I'm here to train." For the first time, Sierra Kane stepped back. And still the whispers grew. By nightfall, the recruits didn't know what to call her anymore. Charity Case, or something else, something dangerous. The fires burned low at Iron Veil Ridge. Wind howled through the dark. Every cadet lay restless in their bunks, replaying that stopwatch in their heads. 47 seconds. A record none of them had touched. But Mason Holt wasn't done. He couldn't let it end there. Because pride doesn't die easy, and Holt's pride had just been cut open. So he planned, waited. At dawn, the combat drills would begin. Hand to hand, no weapons, no excuses. And Holt swore he'd break Arya Cross. Why did dawn always feel colder when you knew a fight was coming? The recruits circled the yard, breath sharp, fists taped, mud still clinging to their boots from Iron Veil Ridge. The whistle hadn't even blown yet, but the air was already thick with anticipation. Hand to hand, no rifles, no excuses, just fists, dirt, and reputation. This was where cadets built names or lost them forever. And in the middle of that ring stood Arya Cross. She didn't bounce on her toes like the others. She didn't shadowbox to warm her arms. She just stood there calm, steady, hands loose at her sides, watching, waiting. The crowd already knew the matchup. Mason Holt, golden boy, broad grin plastered across his face as if the fight was already won. The recruits cheered louder when he stepped forward, his chest rising and falling with cocky rhythm. "End it quick, Holt," someone shouted. "Send her home," another added. The whistle blew. And Holt didn't wait. He lunged. No restraint, no measured move, just raw fury. His fist slammed into Arya's shoulder, driving her against the wooden wall so hard the boards shuddered. The recruits roared. Her shirt tore again, fabric ripping down her back. Laughter erupted until it didn't. Because the tear revealed what too many had only half seen in the flare-light days earlier. The serpent, the skull, the shattered fangs of Phantom Hydra's mark. Black ink glared back at them, undeniable this time. The yard froze. Even Commander Vale stopped packing, his jaw tightening. His eyes locked on the mark like it was a ghost he'd sworn never to see again. On the balcony, General Kalen Draven stepped forward, his face drained pale, his voice cracked the silence. "Who gave you the right," he demanded, "to wear that insignia?" Every recruit looked between him and Arya. Holt's grip on her collar loosened, his grin fractured. "What the hell are you?" he hissed, voice trembling now. Arya's words were quiet, but they cut through the courtyard like a blade. "I didn't ask for it, it was given, by Phantom Hydra himself. I trained under him 8 years. Gasps rippled through the cadets. 8 years? Impossible. Phantom Hydra was a myth, a whisper traded by drunk veterans in bars, a shadow erased from the records. Holt tried to laugh, but it came out cracked, weak. "So you've got ink," he spat. "Doesn't mean you can fight." And then he swung. His fist cut air. Arya wasn't there. She moved like water, every motion smooth, deliberate, effortless. Holt swung again. Another miss. Sweat began to form at his brow, his punches growing wild, desperate. She wasn't fighting him. She was letting him fight himself. "Hit me," Holt shouted, spit flying, fists flailing. "Come on, hit me." But she didn't. She let his arms slow, let his shoulders sag, let him burn out. And then like lightning she stepped in. Her arms snapped around his throat, a twist, a pull. 8 seconds later, Mason Holt lay unconscious in the dirt. The yard went silent. No jeers, no laughter, just the sound of boots shifting uneasily on gravel. Commander Vale's voice carried across the ring, hard as iron. "Effective immediately, Arya Cross is your honorary instructor. You will learn from her." The recruits froze, eyes wide, unable to process what they had just witnessed. Arya didn't smile, didn't gloat. She simply pulled her torn shirt closed, shouldered her battered backpack, and walked out of the ring. The circle of cadets parted for her like water. Not one dared meet her eyes. And as she passed through the gates, the silence followed her like a shadow. The question lingered, heavy in the morning air. What else was she hiding? That evening, the barracks hummed with whispers. Some said she had faked it, that Holt had gone easy. Others swore they had seen death in her eyes. Sierra Kane muttered that it was all theatrics, but her voice didn't carry the same sharp confidence anymore. Not after what they had seen. The stopwatch from the weapons bay, 47 seconds, the chokehold in the ring, her silence that seemed stronger than shouting. The recruits weren't sure what to call her anymore. Not charity case, not stray, not mistake, something else. And Arya didn't seek their respect. She sat alone on her bunk, methodically polishing her gear. Each motion steady, precise. Her eyes distant, fixed on something only she could see. But Holt's humiliation didn't end with the chokehold. Pride never dies easy. And in men like him, it often comes back sharp, dangerous. The next test would decide everything. The casualty drill, first aid under simulated fire. A dummy lay bleeding in the dirt, red dye pumping like real blood, timer ticking, lives measured in seconds. Troy Maddox, loud, desperate to climb after Holt's fall, pushed Arya aside. "I got this," he barked. "Don't need charity case screwing it up." He fumbled fast, bandages loose, blood still seeping. The instructor's voice cut sharp. "You're killing him, cadet." Maddox froze, face flushed. He jabbed a finger at Arya. "She distracted me." The group laughed. His anger echoed through them, easy to ride. Arya didn't argue. She stepped forward, her hands calm, unhurried. Wraps tight, bleeding controlled. In seconds the dummy stabilized. The instructor, Medic Carter, nodded once. "That's how it's done." He pulled a patch from his kit and pressed it into her palm. "You earned this." The laughter around them broke. Silence cracked through the yard. Maddox stormed off, face red with shame. But the whispers didn't stop. They grew sharper. Who was Arya Cross, Phantom Hydra's student, or just a ghost in ink? The real test came that afternoon, the urban simulation. Recruits strapped into gear, rifles locked, helmets low. A mock city grid stretched before them, wired with tripwires, role-play enemies waiting in the shadows. Arya moved with the squad, her signals sharp, precise. 2 fingers down, stop. But Sierra Kane ignored it, smirked, rushed ahead. Her boots snapped a tripwire. A siren wailed, red strobes lit the walls, drill blown. Commander Vale stormed in, his voice a hammer. "Mitchell, your team is a mess." Sierra whispered to Maddox, smirking. "Told you she's useless." Arya stood calm, steady. "She broke formation," she said. "I signaled her to wait." Sierra shrugged, innocent, didn't see it. The squad snickered. The blame landed on Arya again. Vale's glare cut like ice. "Understood, sir," Arya replied. No protest, no defense. The drill reset. But then came the replay. Drone footage overhead. Sierra Kane, clear as day, ignoring the signal. The laughter choked, Sierra's face drained. Vale doctor points, his voice flat. "Disobey again and you're out." No one laughed at Arya after that. That night the barracks were quieter. Cadets replayed the chokehold, the stopwatch, the patch in her palm, the drone footage. Piece by piece, certainty cracked. But Arya wasn't looking for their respect. She wasn't looking at them at all. She sat alone, silent, eyes lowered. Somewhere far away, past the citadel walls, past the drills and ranks, her mind lingered. On shadows, on a vow burned into her skin. And when dawn came again, the air at Blackthorn felt heavier, different. Because Arya Cross hadn't finished. The man in the black jacket hadn't arrived yet. And when he did, everything they thought they knew about her would shatter. What makes a place go silent? Sometimes it's fear, sometimes it's awe, and sometimes it's the moment a shadow from the past rolls through the gates. A week after the chokehold, the Citadel yard froze. Engines growled low, then cut sharp. An unmarked black truck rolled past the guards. No insignia, no license plates, just steel and silence. The recruits straightened instinctively. Even Vale stiffened. Silence weighed heavier than the walls around them. The truck door opened. A man stepped out, broad-shouldered, storm-gray eyes, jacket black as midnight. No rank stitched to his sleeve. No medals on his chest. Yet the guard at his side saluted instantly, spine snapping like a rifle crack. And then General Kalen Draven moved stiffly from the balcony, his salute sharp but slow. His voice carried across the courtyard. "Admiral Jackson Creed." Gasps rippled through the cadets. Creed wasn't just a name. He was a ghost. A shadow pinned to missions no one admitted existed. A figure whispered in war rooms but never spoken of in reports. And then came the words that shattered the camp. "He's here for Arya Cross." Every eye turned. Arya stepped forward, calm, unhurried, her boots quiet against the stone. She didn't falter under the weight of Creed's gaze. For the first time, her eyes softened, just slightly. "You didn't have to come," she said quietly. "Yeah," Creed answered, his voice low, rough. "I did." The recruits didn't move, didn't breathe. Their laughter from weeks before was ashes in their throats now. Sierra Kane's water bottle slipped from her hand, plastic cracking against the stone. Maddox stared, jaw slack. Holt wasn't even there anymore. Rumors whispered he'd been transferred, his career buried under paperwork. Creed placed a hand on Arya's shoulder. She didn't flinch, didn't smile. Together, they walked past the stunned recruits, past the smirks that had died, past the eyes that no longer dared to mock. They climbed into the truck and left the Citadel in a cloud of dust. But her shadow remained. Inside the evaluation hall, officers gathered, files stacked, screens flickering, cadet progress under review. A junior officer, too green to sense the storm he was about to walk into, muttered, "Cross lacks leadership. Maybe cut her." Draven leaned forward, his voice low as steel. "Her file is classified, but I'll tell you this, she could run this camp blindfolded." He slid a sealed envelope across the table, black wax stamped with a coiled serpent, the mark of Phantom Hydra. "These are her evaluations," he said, "from Phantom Hydra himself." The room went silent. The officer broke the seal, his face drained pale with every line he read. No one spoke again. Back in the barracks, the ripple effects tore through the recruits. Sierra Kane's sponsorship evaporated after a leaked video surfaced of her mocking Arya. Defense contractors dropped her name like a stone. Maddox grew quieter, shame pressing on him heavier than any gear. Even Captain Vale's voice softened, measured, cautious, as if he too feared what he had overlooked. But Arya Cross was gone. Her bunk empty, her name still listed as instructor, but she never returned. Some swore she and Creed had built a program far off the grid, a place where soldiers became phantoms. Others whispered she had vanished like Phantom Hydra himself, swallowed by the same shadows that gave her the mark. The cadets who had seen her, the chokehold, the rifle precision, the silence stronger than shouting, never forgot. They carried her story like a scar, passing it down to each new class. Not a legend, not a myth, the truth. A woman who walked into fire and never flinched. But what no one at the Citadel knew was that the story didn't end at the gates. The truck rolled through endless roads, far from the Citadel's walls. Inside, Arya sat beside Creed, her torn shirt hidden now under a plain jacket. The silence between them was heavy, but not uncomfortable. She glanced at him once. "You shouldn't have come for me." Creed's eyes stayed fixed on the road. "You think I had a choice?" "You always have a choice," Arya said softly. He didn't answer. The weight of unspoken memories hung in the air. For years, Creed had been a phantom himself, his name tied to missions erased from records, his shadow stretching across battlefields no one admitted existed. And yet, even he had paused when the request came. Arya Cross, Phantom Hydra's final student. The silence pressed until Arya spoke again. "They still think it's ink, that the mark is just a tattoo." Creed glanced at her, his storm gray eyes softening. "It's not, it's a vow. You and I both know that." Her jaw tightened. She looked away, back out the window, where endless miles of dirt stretched under a fatting sky. The truck rolled to a stop at a checkpoint. Guards didn't ask questions. They saw Creed, saw the Hydra stamp on the papers he handed over and waved them through. Beyond the gates lay something the cadets at Blackthorn could never imagine. A facility carved into rock, no insignia on its walls, no name on its gates, just silence and shadow. Creed parked the truck. "Home," he said simply. Arya stepped out, her boots crunching gravel. She stared at the steel doors that loomed ahead. She hadn't seen them in years, not since the day Phantom Hydra himself had given her the mark. Her throat tightened. Creed placed a hand lightly on her shoulder. He left it to you. You know that, right? She didn't answer because she wasn't ready to believe it. Inside, the air was colder, hallways lined with concrete, lights dim, buzzing low. Arya walked in silence, her hand brushing against the walls as if they were alive with memories. Ghosts of drills, ghosts of missions, ghosts of a man whose voice still echoed in her head. Phantom Hydra, her mentor, her shadow, the man who had trained her, broken her, rebuilt her, and left her with a vow carved into her flesh. Now he was gone, and Creed's voice carried through the silence. They'll be coming for you soon. That mark doesn't stay hidden, not forever. Arya stopped, turned to him, her voice steady. Let them come. Creed studied her for a long moment, then nodded once. A soldier's nod, final. Somewhere beyond the citadel, beyond files stamped black, beyond the reach of command, Arya Cross was stepping back into a world that thought she didn't exist. And the serpent mark wasn't just ink. It was a promise. Why did the walls feel familiar, even after years away? Arya's boots echoed on the concrete floors as she followed Creed deeper into the underground facility. The air was cooler here, humming with the sound of generators hidden behind steel. Shadows stretched long, broken only by strips of buzzing fluorescent light. She didn't speak, neither did he. They didn't need to. The silence said enough. Every corner she turned carried a ghost. A sparring match once fought. A corridor where she had limped after drills until her legs nearly gave out. The mess hall where she and her mentor had eaten in silence, the weight of missions pressed between them heavier than any conversation. Phantom Hydra's domain. And now it was hers, whether she wanted it or not. At the end of the hall, Creed stopped, his hand pressed against a biometric pad. The door hissed open, sliding into the wall. Inside was a chamber unlike the rest. No dust, no neglect, kept alive as if waiting. A table, weapons laid in perfect order, files stacked with black seals, and above them, mounted on the wall, the symbol that lived on her back. The serpent, shattered fangs piercing a skull. Arya froze, her breath caught in her throat. He left it like this, Creed said quietly, for you. She swallowed hard. I never asked for this. Creed's storm-gray eyes didn't move from her. Doesn't matter, you carry the mark, you carry the vow. Her fists clenched, nails digging into her palms. They don't understand it, not at Blackthorn. To them it's just ink, a story to mock, a rumor to laugh at. Creed's jaw tightened. They'll understand soon enough. Everyone does. The question is whether you're ready when they come knocking. Arya looked back at the wall. The serpent seemed to glare down at her, alive even in the silence. Her voice was steady, but her chest felt tight. He believed I was ready. Creed nodded once, then prove him right. The days that followed blurred into relentless rhythm, not the drills of Blackthorn, not the cadet-level games of pride and punishment. This was sharper, harder, a crucible designed to strip away everything that wasn't necessary. Creed put her through it without hesitation. Weapons assembly in complete darkness, running full loads across jagged ground until her knees bled through bandages. Combat simulations that ended only when she broke her opponent's weapon hand. No stopwatch here, no crowd of cadets laughing from the sidelines, just silence. And in that silence she grew sharper. But training was what haunted her. It was the voices. At night, when the generators hummed low and the halls settled into quiet, she heard him again. Phantom Hydra. Not in whispers, not in ghosts, in memory, his voice pressed into her skull. Pain isn't an enemy. It's a reminder you're alive. Use it. Fear is useful. It sharpens, but never let it rule you. Silence wins wars that bullets can't. She sat in the dim light of her bunk, rubbing the serpent mark across her back, wondering if he had known, if he had seen this ending, if he had left her with more than a vow, if he had left her with a burden too heavy to carry. Some nights she wished she could rip the ink from her skin. Other nights, she remembered why she hadn't. Because he had given it to her. And when Phantom Hydra gave you something, you didn't throw it away. One evening, Creed found her in the weapons chamber. She was seated at the table, disassembling and reassembling an M4 in silence, her motions automatic, precise. "You're not here to hide," he said quietly. Arya didn't look up. "I'm not hiding. You're running the drills like they're penance." Her hands paused. For a moment she said nothing. Then her voice broke softer, "Because it feels like it is." Creed studied her, arms crossed, his face unreadable. "You blame yourself for his death." Her jaw tightened. She didn't answer. He stepped closer. "You shouldn't. If he hadn't believed in you, he never would have marked you, never would have trained you this far. He knew this day would come." She looked up at him, eyes burning with quiet anger. "Then why do I still feel like I failed him?" Creed's voice dropped lower. "Because you're human, and you haven't forgiven yourself yet." The words cut deeper than she wanted to admit. She looked back down, forcing her hands to keep moving, snapping the rifle together piece by piece. But Creed was right. The weight she carried wasn't just the mark. It was memory. It was grief. It was the silence left behind when a voice she trusted vanished from the world. Days passed. The drills grew harsher. Creed pushed her harder than any instructor at Blackthorn had dared. He didn't stop when her knees bled. He didn't stop when her hands shook. He didn't stop when she collapsed in the dirt. "Get up," he'd say, "again." And every time she did. But no matter how many times she rose, there was something heavier waiting. Not drills, not Creed, something else. Because shadows don't stay buried, not forever. It started with whispers, a rumor carried across comms, a mission gone wrong in eastern corridors, soldiers ambushed, no survivors except one. A survivor who had seen something he shouldn't have, a mark. And just like that, Arya's past wasn't secret anymore. The day Creed came to her, his expression grim, she already knew. She had felt it in her bones. "They know," he said simply. Arya tightened the strap of her pack, "Then let them come." Creed shook his head. "It won't be like Blackthorn. They're not cadets. They're not recruits. They're professionals, and they won't stop until you're erased. That mark is a target now." Her eyes steadied on his. It always was. For a long moment Creed held her gaze. Then slowly he nodded. Not approval, not dismissal, just acknowledgement. A soldier's nod. That night Arya sat in the dark of her bunk, her mind restless. She could feel it, the storm on the horizon. Not just a test of skill, not just another drill, something real. Her hand brushed the serpent on her back, the ink warm against her skin. The vow wasn't just survival. It wasn't even about her. It was about what came after, about standing for something that silence couldn't erase. And as dawn broke across the facility walls, Arya Cross rose from her bunk with calm steps. Not because she was ready. Because readiness didn't matter anymore. What mattered was the vow. And vows weren't made to be broken. Why did the air feel different that morning? Colder, sharper, like the world itself was bracing for something to break. Arya Cross rose from her bunk before dawn, boots slipping silently onto concrete. Her jacket hung loose over her shoulders, hiding the mark beneath, though she felt its burn as if the serpent were alive, waiting. She walked the halls of the underground facility, past doors that hummed with secrets, past walls that still whispered Phantom Hydra's lessons. Each step echoed in her chest, not just in the corridor, because she knew. The storm Creed had warned her about, it wasn't coming anymore. It had arrived. The mess hall was empty when she sat down, hands wrapped around a mug of black coffee gone cold before she even tasted it. She didn't drink. She stared, waiting. The doors hissed open behind her. Creed stepped in. His gray eyes found hers immediately. He didn't bother with greetings. "They're here," he said. She nodded once. No question, no surprise, just acceptance. "Where?" she asked. Border region, Eastern Front, he said. Extraction teams already compromised. Survivors say they saw the mark. One of yours or someone pretending. Arya's jaw tightened. There are no others. Creed's silence was heavier than words. He slid a file across the table, sealed. Black wax stamped with the serpent. "You're going in," he said. She didn't open the file, didn't need to. Her throat was dry, but her voice was steady. "Alone. You won't get back up in time. And if that mark has surfaced, we need to know why." She stared at the file for a long moment. Her reflection stared back faint in the wax seal. A soldier. A phantom. A woman carrying a vow she never asked for. Finally she spoke, "Then I'll go." Creed's hand pressed briefly against her shoulder. Not reassurance, not comfort, just wait. "Be careful," he said. Her lips curled in the faintest shadow of a smile. "Since when have I been careful?" He didn't answer. The truck rolled out before the sun touched the horizon. The world outside was quieter than she remembered. Long stretches of barren roads. Villages scarred from conflicts no one admitted publicly. Places that carried the memory of battles fought in shadows. She sat in the back, silent, fingers tightening and loosening against her rifle. Every mile was another step away from hiding, another step into the storm. The village appeared just as the sun began to cut the horizon into gold and ash. Smoke curled faint from a collapsed rooftop. Doors hung broken, walls scarred with bullet fire. Arya slid from the truck, boots sinking into dust. She moved with no sound, rifle up, eyes scanning, breathing steady. It wasn't long before she found him. A survivor, soldier's uniform torn, blood matting his sleeve. He froze when he saw her. His eyes dropped to her collar, to the hint of ink curling up from beneath her jacket. His lips trembled. "It's you." Her voice was calm. "What did you see?" The soldier swallowed hard. His eyes darted to the shadows of the ruined street. "The serpent, just like yours, on him," but his voice broke. It wasn't him. It was Hydra. It was. Gunfire cut him down mid-sentence. The shot echoed across the empty street, sharp and merciless. Arya dropped instantly, rolling behind the crumbled wall, rifle snapping up to her shoulder. Dust stung her eyes, but her breathing never broke. She scanned the rooftops, movement, a glint of scope. Her finger squeezed, one shot, the glint disappeared. Silence returned, but it wasn't safe. She crouched lower, dragging the dying soldier back against the wall. His breaths were shallow, blood soaking her sleeve. His hand clutched at her jacket. You don't understand," he whispered. "They're making copies, shadows of the mark." His eyes went still, his grip loosened. Arya closed his hand over his chest, a small gesture, quiet. Then she rose, eyes steady on the ruins. Copies, shadows. Someone was painting ghosts across the battlefield. Someone wanted the mark alive again, but not in its true form. Not as a vow. As a weapon. She moved through the village in silence, every step deliberate, every shadow watched. Her heart was steady, but inside, a question burned hotter with each moment. Who was bold enough to steal Hydra's mark? Who was desperate enough to wear it? By nightfall, she found the answer. A warehouse, steel doors broken. Inside, lanterns flickered low, illuminating crates stamped with insignias long thought buried. And among them men, soldiers, but not like the ones she remembered. Each bore the serpent, tattooed, crude, jagged, wrong. Their movements lacked discipline. Their eyes were too wild. Hired guns, pretenders cloaked in a shadow they didn't understand. Her breath caught, not from fear, from rage. They were mocking it, mocking the vow, turning it into a costume. She stepped forward into the light. The nearest one froze. His smirk faltered when her jacket slipped from her shoulder, the true serpent ink glinting alive on her back. The room hushed. One of them, bigger, older, scars down his face, narrowed his eyes. "You're not supposed to exist." Her voice was calm, steady. Neither are you. He laughed, harsh, empty. You think you're special because some ghost carved you up. You think that makes you untouchable. Arya's gaze didn't waver. It makes me real. You're just pretending. His grin sharpened. Then prove it. The fight was brutal. No cadet drills, no sparring rings, just chaos. Guns cracked, blades flashed, boots slammed against concrete. But Arya moved like she had on the ridge, like she had in the ring with Holt, every strike efficient, every motion deliberate. She wasted nothing. One by one the pretenders fell, not all dead, some groaning, broken on the floor. She didn't kill unless she had to. Hydra had taught her that. Silence wins more than blood. But when the last one lay still, her chest heaving, she stood in the center of the warehouse. And her eyes fell on the crates. Inside were files, weapons lists, shipment routes, and stamped across the papers in ink too clean, too deliberate was the serpent. Not her serpent, not Hydra's, a forgery. Someone high enough, powerful enough was feeding this. Someone wanted Phantom Hydra reborn, not as a vow, but as an army. Her fists clenched around the papers. This wasn't just theft, it was desecration. She set fire to the crates, watched the flames consume the forgeries, watched the serpent burn. But the truth wouldn't burn so easily. When she returned to the facility, Creed was waiting. His eyes searched hers, sharp, unreadable. "What did you find?" he asked. Arya dropped the charred folder onto the table. The serpent glared back from its cover, warped in black soot. Her voice was steady, but her chest felt tight. "They're making ghosts, pretenders, using his mark, our mark, to build something we can't control." Creed's jaw tightened. He looked at the file, then back at her. "You realize what this means?" She nodded once. "It means the war never ended. It just went underground." For a moment, silence stretched heavy between them. Then Creed said softly, almost like a vow of his own, "Then we'll drag it back into the light." Arya looked down at the serpent burned into her skin. She thought of Hydra, of his voice, of the vow he had left her with. And for the first time in years, she whispered aloud to herself, "Silence isn't surrender, it's waiting." Her reflection in the window stared back, eyes steady, face calm. And somewhere beyond the citadel, beyond the facility, beyond the world that thought she was gone, an enemy was already watching, waiting for her to come. Why do betrayals always come from the people you least expect? Arya didn't ask that out loud, but the question followed her as she walked the silent halls of the underground facility. Her boots carried soot from the warehouse, her jacket still smelling faintly of smoke. On the table in Creed's office lay the charred folder she had dragged back. The false serpent glared at her from its warped cover. It felt wrong to even look at it, like staring at a forgery of someone's grave. "They've gone deeper than I thought," Creed said. His voice was low, measured, like he was weighing every word. "Someone's bankrolling this. Pretenders don't find weapons caches like that on their own." Arya's gaze didn't leave the file. Someone inside. Creed's silence was enough of an answer. She finally looked at him. "Then it's not just a mission anymore, it's a leak." Creed's storm-gray eyes narrowed. "Leaks can be patched, traitors can't." The words hung heavy, a threat, a truth, a warning. For the next week, Arya moved like a shadow across borders. Creed had arranged small assignments, quiet, targeted strikes against cells carrying the false serpent. Every fight confirmed the same thing. Someone was feeding them. Their gear was too clean, their intel too precise. These weren't just gangs of mercenaries tattooing themselves for bravado. They were being groomed, built. Each time she dropped another cell, Arya collected fragments. Weapons lists, encrypted drives, half-burned notes. The same forged serpent inked into every page. And every time the same thought gnawed at her. This wasn't random. This was deliberate. But by the time she returned to the facility, something felt different, off. The air was heavier, quieter. Guards she passed didn't meet her eyes. Conversations hushed as she walked through. When she stepped into the weapons chamber, Creed was waiting, not alone. Another figure leaned against the table, tall, sharp, with dark hair tied back and a smile too thin to be trusted. Sierra Kane, the same cadet who once mocked her at Blackthorn. Arya froze. Her chest tightened though her face didn't show it. What is she doing here? Sierra's smirk sharpened. Nice to see you too, Cross. Creed's voice was level. She's here because her sponsorship dropped her after that video. No allies, no backing. She came to me. Arya's eyes locked on Sierra's. You brought her here, to this place. Sierra shrugged, feigning innocence. What, you think you're the only ghost walking around with nothing left? Arya's stomach twisted. Something in her gut whispered wrong, but Creed's tone left no room for argument. She knows enough to be useful, better here than in the wind. Arya said nothing. She turned away, but her silence wasn't agreement. It was suspicion. That suspicion only grew. Over the next days, Sierra shadowed her during drills, always watching, always smiling that thin, mocking smile. You really believe your Hydra's last? Sierra asked one evening, her voice dripping with false curiosity. Because some people out there don't. Arya's reply was steady, cold. Belief isn't proof. But the word stayed with her long after Sierra left. Then came the ambush. A recon run along the northern corridor. Arya and Sierra moved in silence through the crumbling ruins of an old industrial site. Arya's senses were sharp, every shadow measured, every sound weighed. Too quiet. She raised her hand, signal to halt. Sierra ignored it, kept moving. The tripwire snapped. Gunfire erupted from the windows above. Bullets tore into concrete, sparks flying. Arya dove for cover, returning fire with precision, every shot measured. Sierra dropped beside her, panic in her eyes. They knew we were coming, Sierra shouted. Arya's jaw clenched. Her rifle barked twice, 2 enemies falling from the roof. Or someone told them. The firefight was brutal. Dust filled the air, heat of rounds cracking inches from her head. Arya moved with ruthless calm, each shot cutting down another target. Sierra was sloppy, firing wide, breath ragged. By the time the last gun fell silent, Arya was on her knees behind cover, her chest heaving. Sierra crouched opposite, her hands trembling on the rifle. Arya's eyes locked on her. Who did you tell? Sierra blinked, feigning confusion. What? You ignored my signal. Again, just like at Blackthorn, and they were waiting, exactly where we were. Sierra's lips curled. Careful, Cross, paranoia makes you sloppy. Arya's finger brushed the trigger, though the rifle stayed pointed at the floor. Her voice was ice. If you're lying, I'll know. For a long moment Sierra's smile held, but her eyes flickered just enough. Arya filed it away. When they returned to the facility, Creed was waiting again. Arya dropped her rifle on the table, her face unreadable. We were compromised, she said flatly. Creed's jaw tightened. Casualties. Not us, Arya said, but someone tipped them. Creed's eyes flicked between Arya and Sierra. His voice dropped lower. Are you accusing her? Arya didn't hesitate. Yes. Sierra scoffed, crossing her arms. Of course she is. She's been waiting to since the day I walked in. Creed's silence pressed down like a storm. Finally he spoke. I'll look into it. Arya stepped forward, her voice sharper now. Looking isn't enough. If she's compromised, she'll bury us all. Creed's gray eyes cut into hers. I said I'll look into it. Arya's jaw locked. She didn't push further, but as she left the room, she knew. She couldn't trust Creed to see it until it was too late. That night she sat alone in her quarters, polishing her sidearm. Her reflection stared back at her in the steel. Sierra's smile, the forged serpent, the ambush that shouldn't have happened. The threads were connecting, even if no one wanted to see them. And yet, one question gnawed at her more than the rest. Why? If Sierra was leaking intel, why had she come here at all? Why put herself so close to the very people who could expose her? Unless exposure wasn't the point, unless infiltration was. Arya set the pistol down, her hand steady. She could almost hear Phantom Hydra's voice again. Trust silence, not smiles, shadows, not words. She leaned back against the cold wall, her eyes closing briefly. The serpent on her back burned hotter than ever. Because somewhere deep in her gut, Arya knew. The betrayal wasn't coming. It was already here. What do you do when the knife at your back is held by someone you once trained beside? Arya asked herself that as she moved through the dim corridors of the facility, the hum of generators in her ears, the serpent on her back burning hotter than the steel lights overhead. She knew. Creed didn't. The recruits didn't. But she did. Sierra Kane wasn't here by accident. Arya could feel it in the way Sierra's eyes lingered on every keypad, every hallway, every restricted door. She wasn't learning. She was memorizing. The betrayal wasn't coming. It was already here. But knowing a thing and proving it were two different wars. For days, Arya shadowed Sierra in silence. She watched her in the weapons chamber, fingers brushing over gear like she was cataloging what to take. She followed her in the mess hall, listening as Sierra leaned in close to guards, laughing, disarming them with charm while her eyes flicked toward the cameras. And every night Sierra disappeared for hours. Excuses rolled easily off her tongue, late drills, conditioning, filing reports. But Arya knew better. Still, Creed didn't see it, or maybe he didn't want to. Your judgment's clouded, he told Arya one evening, his voice low, calm, but edged with frustration. You've hated her since Blackthorn. Don't let old grudges blind you now. Arya's stare was steady. I don't hate her, I don't trust her. That's different. Creed's gray eyes searched hers for a long moment. Until I have proof, she stays. Arya said nothing more, but inside the vow burned. Proof would come. It did 3 nights later. The alarms didn't sound when the breach came. Whoever triggered it knew the systems. The cameras looped, feeds cycling back on themselves. The guards at the perimeter swore they saw nothing. But Arya wasn't asleep. She heard the faint scrape of boots in the corridor outside her quarters. She rose silently, sidearm in hand, her breath steady. The sound moved toward the restricted wing. The wing only Creed, Arya, and a handful of staff were cleared for. She followed. The hallway stretched long, shadows slicing across steel. At the end, a figure crouched at the keypad, fingers moving quick, confident, not fumbling, not guessing, typing in sequence like she'd practiced it 100 times. Sierra Kane. Arya's voice cut the silence. You're good with numbers for someone who claims she can't follow signals. Sierra froze. Slowly she straightened, turning to face her. The smirk was gone, in its place calm, cold. I wondered how long it would take you, Sierra said. Arya's gun didn't waver. Open it, and you won't leave this hallway. Sierra's eyes flicked to the weapon, then back to Arya. She didn't flinch. Funny thing about marks, she said softly. They're only as strong as the fear they carry. Once people stop fearing them, they're just ink. Arya's jaw tightened. You wouldn't understand, you never did. Oh, I understand, Sierra snapped now, her voice rising. I watched you walk into Blackthorn looking like you belonged nowhere, and somehow they bent for you. The general saluted you. Vale named you instructor, and me? Her chest heaved. I bled the same mud, fired the same rounds, but I was just another face in the crowd. I deserved more. Arya's voice was quiet, controlled. So you sold Hydra's name for attention. Sierra's smirk returned, thin, venomous. I didn't sell it, I gave it new life. You think that mark belongs to you, to him? No, it belongs to whoever's smart enough to use it, and people with real power, real money want it. Her hand brushed the keypad again. And when I hand them this facility, when I hand them Creed, when I hand them you, They'll know I'm more than just a forgotten cadet. Arya's breath stilled. In that moment the vow burned hotter than ever. Phantom Hydra's voice echoed in her skull. Silence wins wars that bullets can't. She didn't pull the trigger, not yet. Instead, she stepped closer, her boots sharp on steel, her voice cut low. You think you're building a legacy. You're building your own grave. Sierra's eyes flickered just for a second, but then her grin sharpened. Then bury me. The lights exploded into red as the alarms finally caught up. Sirens wailed, heavy doors slamming shut across the corridors. Creed's voice roared over the intercom, demanding positions, status, answers. Sierra moved fast, shoving the keypad. Arya lunged. The fight was brutal in the flashing red light. Sierra wasn't sloppy this time, she was trained, stronger than Arya remembered. Every strike was aimed to kill, not distract. But Arya was sharper, Hydra's student, every block precise, every counter deliberate. Still, Sierra fought like someone with nothing left to lose, and that kind of desperation was dangerous. Steel cracked, blood smeared, Arya's breath came hard, Sierra's grin widened through the fight. You can't kill me, Sierra hissed. If you do, they'll replace me. Another name, another face, another traitor with another serpent. You can't erase the hunger for it. Arya's arm locked around her throat, pinning her against the wall. Her voice was ice, steady even as rage burned inside. You're right, I can't erase it, but I can stop you. Sierra's hand clawed at her arm. Her smirk faltered. For the first time, her eyes flickered with fear. Boots thundered down the hall. Creed's voice cut through. Arya. She looked up. Creed stood at the end of the corridor, weapon drawn, guards behind him. His eyes took in the scene. Sierra pinned, the keypad half cracked, Arya's arm locked like a vice. For a moment, silence hung heavy. Then Creed's voice cut through, steady. Stand down, Cross. Arya didn't move. Her grip tightened. Stand down. Her chest heaved. She looked at Sierra, the cadet who had mocked her, the traitor who had worn her mentor's mark like a toy, the infiltrator who would have handed them all over for ambition. Her voice was low, almost a whisper. Phantom Hydra said silence wins wars, but sometimes silence kills. Creed's weapon didn't lower. If you kill her, they'll call it vengeance, not justice, and they'll use it against you. Arya's heart pounded. Her grip trembled not from weakness but from choice. The hardest kind of strength isn't pulling a trigger, it's holding it back. Slowly she released Sierra. The traitor collapsed to the floor, gasping. Creed's guards surged forward, yanking her into cuffs, dragging her away. Arya stood there, blood on her knuckles, breath ragged, the serpent burning on her back. Creed's eyes met hers. For a moment, nothing passed between them but understanding. You did right, he said quietly. Arya's gaze stayed on the floor. It doesn't feel like it. Creed's voice was low, reflective. It never does. As the sirens died and the facility steadied, Arya returned alone to her quarters. She sat in the dark, the weight of restraint heavier than blood. Her hands shook now when no one could see. The serpent mark wasn't calm tonight. It burned. Not with shame, not with weakness, but with a promise. Because Sierra Kane wasn't wrong. There would be others, another name, another face, another serpent etched into skin by greed instead of belief. The war for Hydra's shadow wasn't over. It was only beginning. How do wars end? With silence, with blood, or with a truth no one wanted to face? Arya Cross didn't ask aloud, but the question haunted her in the weeks after Sierra's betrayal. The facility still hummed with drills and orders, but something had shifted. Trust had thinned. Shadows lingered longer. Even Creed's gray eyes seemed darker, as though he carried the weight of a war that hadn't yet begun. Sierra Kane was gone, locked away in an off-grid black site, but her words hadn't vanished with her. Another name, another face, another serpent. Arya knew she was right. Because Hydra's mark wasn't just ink anymore. It was currency. Whoever controlled it could build an army of ghosts. The file came in 2 weeks later. Creed slid it across the table in the weapons chamber, the serpent on its seal warped and burned like the last one. Arya didn't open it. Not yet. "Where?" she asked. "Port Raven," Creed said. His voice was low, steady. "They're moving the operation offshore, a shipment. Weapons, data, maybe more. We can't let it leave the docks." Arya's jaw tightened. "How many?" Creed's eyes didn't blink. "Enough." That was all he said. Enough. That night, Arya stood alone on the balcony above the facility's outer gates. The wind cut sharp against her face. In the glass reflection beside her, the serpent mark seemed alive, coiled and ready. She remembered Phantom Hydra's voice again. "Your enemy isn't the bullet, it's the lie behind it." And this was the biggest lie yet. The docks of Port Raven were a scar on the coast. Rusted cranes leaned like broken spines. Cargo containers stacked into a maze of steel and shadow. The air stank of salt and oil, heavy with the hum of generators powering floodlights that cut the night into harsh angles. Arya crouched low on the ridge above, her rifle steady, her breathing calm. Below, men moved in precise lines, not mercenaries, not wild-eyed pretenders, soldiers, too disciplined to be random, too quiet to be amateurs. And every single one bore the serpent. She watched them load crates into a freighter, the false insignia stamped bold across steel. It wasn't just weapons. It wasn't just data. It was Hydra's shadow, boxed and branded for sale. Her chest tightened. This wasn't about her anymore. This was about the vow. She slipped down from the ridge, moving like water between containers, boots silent, rifle low, eyes sharp. Her comm crackled softly, Creed's voice. "Extraction point south dock, clear the shipment, confirm who's running this." Arya's whisper was calm, understood. She moved deeper, slipping past patrols, every step deliberate. The serpent mark on their arms mocked her with every turn. Pretenders, thieves. But the discipline in their movements told her something else. This wasn't just a gang. This was an army in the making. And then she saw him. At the far dock under the floodlight, a man in a long coat barked orders. His voice carried sharp over the clatter of crates. His face was lined, scarred, but his eyes were alive with fire. Not a soldier, a believer. Arya crept closer, her breath steady, until his words reached her ears. "Hydra is more than a man, more than a myth, it's a mantle. And tonight we take it back. No longer in the shadows. The serpent belongs to us all." The men roared their approval. Arya's throat tightened. He wasn't just selling Hydra's mark. He was preaching it, warping it, turning a vow into a rallying cry. She steadied her rifle, scope locked on his chest. One shot could end it. One pull of the trigger could silence the lie before it spread. Her finger brushed the trigger. And then she froze. Hydra's voice echoed in her skull. "Silence wins wars that bullets can't." If she killed him, the men below wouldn't scatter. They'd worship him, martyr him. The serpent would spread faster, blood fueling the lie. She lowered the rifle. Instead, she whispered into her comm, "Creed recording." "Always," he replied. She stepped forward into the floodlight, her jacket sliding off her shoulder. The serpent mark burned alive on her back. The yard froze. Every soldier turned. The man in the coat faltered mid-sentence, his fire stuttering when he saw the true insignia. Arya's voice carried across the dock, calm, steady. "You wear ink you don't understand. You speak words you didn't earn. That mark doesn't belong to you. It's not a costume, it's a vow. Given, not taken." The silence was heavy. The soldiers shifted, uncertain. Their rifles wavered, eyes darting between her and the man in the coat. He found his voice again, though weaker now. "She's one woman, one ghost clinging to a dead past. We are Hydra now." Arya's eyes locked on his. "No, you're just thieves. Hydra never needed numbers, it needed silence, it needed strength, and it needed sacrifice." Her hand brushed the serpent on her back. I was given this. I didn't want it, but I carry it because someone believed I could, and I will not let you bury him under your lies. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then one soldier lowered his rifle, then another. The man in the coat shouted, desperate now, "She's nothing, she bleeds like the rest." But his words rang hollow. The men weren't looking at him anymore. They were looking at her, at the mark, at the vow. And in that silence the lie cracked. Arya stepped closer. Her voice was soft now, but every soldier heard it. Hydra wasn't a myth, he was a man. He taught me fear sharpens, silence wins, sacrifice matters. You want to honor him, then stop pretending. Stop desecrating his name, or face me and I'll show you what his silence taught me. The man in the coat drew his pistol, fury twisting his face. Then die with him. The shot cracked. But Arya was faster. Her rifle barked once. His body hit the dock, the pistol clattering beside him. Silence again. And this time it held. The soldiers lowered their weapons. None moved forward, none spoke, because deep down they knew. They had followed a lie, and the truth had just walked into the light. By dawn, Creed's team swept the docks, crates secured, soldiers dispersed, the freighter seized. When Arya stood on the pier, the ocean wind cutting cold against her face, Creed stepped beside her. "You could have killed him sooner," he said quietly. Arya's eyes stayed on the horizon. "If I had, he would have lived forever." Creed studied her for a long moment, then he nodded once. Hydra chose well. Arya didn't answer. Her gaze stayed fixed on the waves, the serpent burning faint on her skin beneath her jacket. Because this war wasn't over, it never would be. There would always be another name, another face, another serpent etched into skin without meaning. But tonight silence had won. And as the sun rose over Port Raven, painting the water in fire and gold, Arya Cross carried the vow forward, not for glory, not for recognition, but because someone once believed she could. Sometimes dignity doesn't shout. It doesn't explain. It doesn't beg to be understood. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak at all. It simply acts.